Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we're revisiting one of the world's most famous unexplained tragedies, a campsite abandoned in the dead of winter, a tent slashed from the inside, and decades of theories that still refuse to neatly fit the evidence.
You know, what has always unsettled me about this case, about the Ural Mountains specifically, is how that frozen isolation acts like this terrifying time capsule.
Yeah, it really does.
Right. I mean, the extreme cold meticulously preserved all the physical clues, the footprints, the abandoned gear, the sheer physical trauma on the bodies. Yet, the truth of what actually happened that night has been frozen just out of reach for, well, nearly 7 decades now.
It's totally haunting, and it's a case that frustrates forensic scientists just as much as it haunts, armchair detectives.
Absolutely.
I want you to imagine yourself in that situation for a second. You are in a canvas tent on a barren, snow-swept slope. The temperature outside is like plunging past minus 25 degrees Celsius.
Which is unimaginably cold.
Yeah, right. And the wind sounds like a freight train screaming over the mountain. And suddenly, something happens that is so catastrophic, so immediately terrifying, that instead of untying the flaps of your tent, you take a knife, you slash the fabric open, and you run out into the pitch black, freezing night.
Without even putting your boots on.
Exactly, without your boots. What could possibly compel 9 highly trained survivalists to choose certain death by exposure over whatever was inside that tent? You have probably heard whispers of this case, but today we're going to walk through the raw evidence to see what really happened.
And to really explore that question, we have to strip away the decades of internet mythology, right?
Yeah.
We need to look at the actual reality of the winter of 1959.
Yeah, because we really need to understand the physical and psychological profile of the people involved here. These were not reckless amateurs out for a weekend stroll.
No, not at all. They were exceptionally well prepared. We're talking about 10 hikers, mostly students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute.
In Sverdlovsk, great.
Yeah, exactly. And, they were part of this heavily state-sponsored culture of wilderness exploration in the Soviet Union. It was known as tourism.
And their leader, Igor Dyatlov, he was only 23, but he was already super experienced, wasn't he?
He was. He was an engineering student with extensive experience in extreme weather. I mean, the whole group was aiming for a grade 3 certification.
So what does a grade 3 certification actually entail, like in 1950s Soviet terms?
Well, it was basically the highest possible difficulty classification you could get. To earn it, the group had to complete a trek of at least 300 kilometers in severe winter conditions.
300 kilometers in the snow.
Right. And they were traveling on heavy wooden skis, navigating strictly by map and compass, carrying these massive, heavy canvas tents.
Wow. And they didn't have any of the modern, lightweight, moisture-wicking gear we have today, did they?
Not even close. They wore heavy wool and canvas. So, they knew exactly how unforgiving the terrain was, and they were trained on how to endure it.
Okay, so picture this. On January 23, they start taking trains and trucks deep into the northern Ural Mountains. They eventually reach this remote logging settlement called Vizhai.
Which is pretty much the end of the line for civilization out there.
Right. From there, they push to an abandoned mining settlement. And this is where the dynamic of the group fundamentally shifts, because one of them actually has to turn back.
Yeah, Yuri Yudin. He experienced a severe flare-up of sciatica.
Oh, man. Sciatica is no joke.
It really isn't. Anyone who has experienced sciatic nerve pain knows it could just be totally debilitating. You get this shooting agony down the lower back and leg.
And imagine combining that with carrying a heavy pack on skis through deep taiga snow in sub-zero temperatures.
His body simply couldn't handle it. I mean, the strict safety protocols they followed dictated that he had to turn back.
He must have been so devastated at the time, to miss the expedition.
Oh, he was crushed.
Yeah.
But, that inflammation literally saved his life. He returned home while the remaining 9 continued into the wilderness.
So the remaining 9, they followed these river valleys, skiing through the deep snow, mapping their route. And on February 1st, 1959, around 3 in the afternoon, they find themselves on the exposed, treeless eastern slope of a mountain called Kolochyaku.
Which, ominously enough, translates in the local indigenous Mansi language to Dead Mountain.
Yeah, you really can't make that up. So instead of dropping down into the tree line where they would be, sheltered from the wind, they dig into the snow on the open slope and pitch their tent. Why would a group of experts make that call?
Well, mountaineering is always this really delicate battle of energy conservation and altitude management.
Right, because climbing back up is exhausting.
Exactly. They had started late that day, and they'd climbed a significant way up the slope. Heading a mile and a half down into the forest meant giving up all the altitude they just exhausted themselves to gain.
Just to have to climb it all over again the next morning.
Yeah. Furthermore, Dyatlov might have actually wanted to practice camping on an exposed face. That kind of experience was a requirement for their Grade 3 certification.
Okay, that makes sense. So they used their skis to dig a flat platform into the snowpack. They put up their large 9-person canvas tent, secure it with ski poles, and just settle in.
Right. And from their recovered diaries and photographs, we actually know they were in really great spirits that evening.
Yeah, I read they even put together this satirical little camp newspaper they called Evening Oat Torton, making inside jokes about their trip.
They were just kids having fun. But then the timeline just stops.
Completely, because they were supposed to send a check-in telegram to their sports club when they returned to Vizhai around February 12th.
And that date comes and goes with no word.
Right. The university initially assumes, well, maybe they're just delayed by weather, but by late February, families start panicking. They start demanding a rescue operation.
So the military, fellow students, and local hunters are all deployed to retrace their route.
And then, on February 26th, a searcher named Mikhail Sherevin spots something on the slope of Kholat Shekel.
Yeah, Sherevin spots the tent. And the scene he finds, it becomes the cornerstone of this entire mystery.
What exactly did he find?
Well, the tent is partially collapsed under a layer of snow. The entrance is closed, right? The flaps are still buttoned up. But the side of the tent facing down the slope is sliced open.
And when forensic teams later examined the canvas, they found something that just completely changed the nature of the investigation, didn't they?
They did. Forensic analysis proved definitively that the cuts were made from the inside.
From the inside? That is so wild.
Yeah, when you cut thick canvas, the microscopic fraying of the threads and the tension lines dictate the direction of the blade. The blade was pushed through the fabric from within the tent and dragged downward.
You only do that if the main exit is totally blocked, or if you are in such a state of absolute adrenaline-fueled panic that you can't even waste the 10 seconds it takes to unbutton a flap.
Precisely. And furthermore, when the searchers looked inside the tent, they found almost all of the group's survival gear.
Wait, all of it?
Pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about their heavy winter coats, their boots, their extra layers, their food rations, cameras, their money.
Just left there.
Yes. The stove was even disassembled and stored away. It was all left behind in a remarkably orderly fashion. There was absolutely no sign of a physical struggle or a fight inside the shelter.
That is so eerie. So outside the tent, the searchers find these footprints. And this is where the sheer horror of the situation really crystallizes for me.
The tracks are chilling.
Yeah. There are 8 or 9 distinct sets of tracks leading downslope toward the distant forest. And the tracks showed the hikers were moving in single file.
And crucially, they were either wearing only socks, a single boot, or were entirely barefoot.
Which is just insane, walking into minus 25-degree weather without shoes.
It's a death sentence. But the preservation of those footprints is actually a fascinating meteorological anomaly all by itself.
Really? How so? I always wondered how footprints survived weeks of winter storms.
Well, in specific extreme cold conditions, when a person steps on snow, the weight compresses the snow underfoot, making it much denser than the surrounding powder.
Okay, so it packs it down hard.
Right. So when fierce winds sweep over the mountain over the following weeks, the loose, powdery snow is blown away, but the compressed footprints sublimate, meaning they turn directly from solid ice to gas at a much slower rate.
Oh, wow. So the wind carves away the soft snow around them.
Exactly, leaving the footprints standing up like these raised pillars or columns in the snow.
That is incredible. So these raised pillars of footprints show the group walking not running, but walking steadily down the mountain in the dark.
Right. And the lack of running suggests 2 really important things. First, running in deep snow in the dark is incredibly difficult and exhausting. You just can't sprint.
Sure, that makes sense.
And second, It suggests they were trying to stay together as a group. They were fleeing something they perceived as an immediate catastrophic threat at the tent, but they were trying to maintain order as they retreated to the presumed safety of the tree line.
So the searchers followed these tracks about 1.5 kilometers down to the edge of the forest. And underneath this massive ancient cedar tree, they find the first two bodies.
Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonychenko.
Right. And they're lying next to the remnants of this small, desperate little fire.
And they were clad only in their underwear.
Which is horrifying. What else did the scene tell them?
The forensic examination of the scene showed that the lower branches of the cedar tree had been snapped off up to a height of about 5 meters.
5 meters? That's really high up.
It is. And skin and tissue were actually found in the bark of the tree, which indicated the men had frantically climbed it.
Were they just trying to get branches for the fire?
They might have been gathering dry branches, yeah. But more likely, they were trying to get a vantage point to look back up the slope toward the tent.
To see if whatever terrified them was still there.
Exactly. To see if the threat had passed or to look for their missing friends in the dark.
You know, there is one detail from the autopsy of Krivonychenko that has just always stayed with me. He had bitten off a piece of his own knuckle.
Yeah, that's a very grim detail.
The skin was actually found in his mouth. What on earth drives a person to do that?
It's a harrowing physiological response to extreme cold, unfortunately. As hypothermia sets in and your core temperature drops, your body restricts blood flow to your extremities to keep your vital organs warm.
Right, so your hands and feet go completely numb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Biting down on his own knuckle was likely this desperate, primitive attempt to test if he had any sensation left in his hand. Or to use intense physical pain to shock his system into staying conscious as the lethargy of freezing to death took over.
That is just heartbreaking. So between that cedar tree and the abandoned tent up the mountain, searchers find 3 more bodies spaced out in the snow.
Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobod.
And based on how they were found, it looked like they were trying to go back, right?
Yeah, based on the positions of their bodies and the way they were facing, it was very clear they were attempting to crawl back up the mountain.
Which means they realized the fire wasn't going to save them.
Exactly. They realized the small fire at the tree line was not enough. The cold was overwhelming them, and they made the agonizing decision to try and crawl back up to the tent to retrieve their coats and boots.
And the physiological process of freezing to death while doing extreme physical exertion like that, it is just brutal. I read that your blood literally thickens.
It does. As your body temperature plummets, your blood becomes much more viscous. So your heart has to pump exponentially harder to push this thickened blood through your circulatory system.
Wow. So you're just exhausting your heart.
Totally. The muscles receive less oxygen, leading to profound exhaustion and loss of motor control. Eventually, the heart simply gives out or the brain shuts down due to lack of oxygenated blood.
And that is how the first 5 victims died. The autopsies confirmed hypothermia was the primary cause of death.
Right. But, that leaves 4 hikers unaccounted for at this point.
Yeah. The search continues for months. It isn't until the spring thaw in May that the snow finally reveals them, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine deeper in the woods.
Lyudmila Dubanina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolovatov, and Nikolai Thibault-Berniol.
And their discovery is what transforms this whole thing from a terrible mountaineering accident into a full-blown forensic nightmare.
Absolutely. The medical examiner, Boris Pozoroj, conducted the autopsies on these final 4 bodies. And while Kolovatov died of hypothermia like the others, the remaining 3 suffered massive, fatal trauma.
What kind of trauma are we talking about?
Well, Thibault-Berniol had a severely depressed skull fracture. Dubanina and Zolotaryov had their chests completely crushed.
Crushed chests.
Yes. Multiple ribs were broken on both sides, and the broken bone fragments had actually penetrated their pleural cavities and hearts.
Vazarosteny testified that the force required to crush their ribs and skulls like that was equivalent to being struck by a car moving at high speed, or like being subjected to extreme localized pressure.
Which is completely bizarre given the environment.
Right. And here is the truly bizarre part. There were absolutely 0 external lacerations. No tire tracks, no massive bruising on the skin, no puncture wounds from an impact. How does the human body suffer a car crash level of trauma without the skin showing massive exterior damage.
I know it sounds impossible, but the physics of blunt force trauma can actually be highly counterintuitive.
How so?
Think about it like this. Imagine putting a delicate glass vase inside a thick down pillow, right? And then you strike the pillow with a heavy wooden bat.
Okay, I can picture that.
The pillow itself won't tear or show a puncture wound, but the kinetic energy transfers directly through the soft material and shatters the rigid structure of the vase inside.
Oh, wow. So their clothing was the pillow.
Exactly. In the case of the hikers, their thick winter clothing, combined with the pliable nature of human skin and muscle tissue under slow, immense pressure, it acted like that pillow.
So the sheer weight compressed their chest cavities until the ribs snapped.
Right. But it didn't slice or severely bruise the exterior tissue the way a localized sharp impact would.
That makes a chilling amount of sense. But the trauma wasn't the only thing Vozrozhdeny noted, was it? He also recorded some incredibly gruesome details.
He did. Both Dubinina and Zolotaryov were missing their eyes.
Oh.
And Dubinina was also missing her tongue, parts of her lips, and a significant amount of facial tissue.
You know, when you hear phrases like missing tongue and crushed chest, the human mind immediately starts painting pictures of torture or ritual sacrifice or some monstrous attack.
It does. It's human nature to leap to the sensational. And unfortunately, the official handling of the investigation did absolutely nothing to calm those fears.
Yeah, let's talk about the official Soviet response. Because the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, he was under immense pressure from a bureaucratic government that just despised unsolved mysteries, right?
Oh, totally. They wanted neat, clean answers. So in May of 1959, Ivanov abruptly closed the investigation.
Just shut it down.
Shut it down. His final report concluded that the hikers died due to a, quote, compelling natural force that they were unable to overcome.
I mean, compelling natural force is just a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection. It means absolutely nothing while sounding so definitive.
Exactly. But Ivanov did do something else before closing the files that really fueled the conspiracy fires.
What was that?
He ordered radiological testing on the victim's clothing.
Wait, really? Why would he test for radiation on a hiking trip?
That's the million-dollar question. And the results showed traces of beta radiation, specifically on Dubinina's sweater and Kolovatov's trousers. And after that, the files were sealed and sent to a restricted archive.
We are talking about radiation on dead bodies in 1959 at the absolute height of the Cold War.
It's the perfect storm for paranoia.
Seriously, you have a slashed tent, barefoot victims, crushed ribs, missing tongues, an official government cover-up, and radiation. It is the perfect recipe for decades of conspiracy theories.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah, the case basically sat untouched by authorities for 60 years, while the internet spent millions of hours analyzing every single frame of their recovered photographs. It wasn't until 2019 that the Russian government actually reopened the case.
That's right. Andrei Kuryakov, a senior prosecutor, led a massive reinvestigation utilizing modern topographical and meteorological tools.
And what did his team find?
His team concluded that a specific type of avalanche was the culprit. But avalanche experts globally were deeply skeptical of this.
Why were they skeptical? An avalanche on a snowy mountain seems like the most logical answer.
Well, the slope of Kholat Shakal was generally considered too shallow for a typical avalanche. And more importantly, there was no massive debris field found by the searchers. The tent wasn't buried under 10 feet of snow.
This skepticism prompted independent scientists to step in, didn't it? In 2021, two researchers, Johann Gaume from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne and Alexander Puzrin from ETH Zurich, published a peer-reviewed simulation of the snow mechanics on that exact slope.
And they used some highly unexpected technology to do it.
Okay, yes, I love this part. Tell us what they used.
They adapted the incredibly sophisticated snow particle physics software that was originally developed for Disney's animated film Frozen.
Wait, Disney's Frozen, the cartoon.
Yes. When Disney animators needed snow to behave realistically in the movie, sometimes clumping like a solid, sometimes flowing like a fluid, they utilized a mathematical framework called the Material Point Method, or MPM.
That is so wild that animation software solved a 60-year-old mystery.
It's brilliant, really. Gaume and Puzrin took this MPM framework and adapted it to simulate the specific complex mechanical behavior of the snowpack on Colette Cycle.
Okay, let's walk through exactly what that simulation revealed, because like you said earlier, it wasn't a massive cinematic avalanche that buried the whole mountain, was it?
No, not at all. It was a highly localized event known as a slab avalanche.
Okay, what exactly is a slab avalanche?
To understand this, we have to look at the snowpack itself. Over the winter, different layers of snow fall and react to temperature changes. Underneath the hard, wind-packed surface layers, a phenomenon called depth hoar can form.
Depth hoar.
Yeah. Depth hoar consists of large, cup-shaped ice crystals that don't bond well with each other. They act almost like a layer of microscopic ball bearings buried deep within the snowpack.
Oh, I see. So you have a heavy, hard slab of snow resting on top of a fragile layer of icy ball bearings.
Precisely. Now, remember when the hikers dug into the slope to create a flat shelf for their tent?
Yeah, to sleep on an even surface.
Well, they essentially made a vertical cut into that snowpack.
Mm.
This cut compromised the structural integrity of the heavy slab resting right above them. And then, over the next 9 hours, intense katabatic winds, which are gravity-driven winds flowing rapidly down the mountain, deposited a massive amount of dense, heavy snow directly above their tent platform.
And eventually the weight simply becomes too much for that compromised layer of depth hoar to support.
Exactly. The simulation proved that the sheer strength of the snowpack would definitively fail under those exact conditions.
But wait, if it failed, why wasn't it a huge wave of snow?
Because instead of a tidal wave of powdery snow sweeping down the mountain, it was more like a massive block of solid concrete slipping off a flatbed truck.
Whoa!
Yeah, a dense block of hard, wind-packed snow, perhaps only a few meters across, released and dropped a few feet directly onto the tent.
Okay, but if a block of concrete hard snow drops on you, why was the tent found mostly intact by searchers? I mean, there was a ski pole still standing upright, holding up a corner of the tent. If it was an avalanche, why wouldn't it wipe away the delicate footprints just a few feet away?
That is the crucial difference between a powder avalanche and a small slab avalanche.
Yes.
The slab drops vertically into the excavated pit the hikers dug, right? Crushing whatever is directly underneath it. And then it simply stops.
It doesn't keep sliding.
Right. It doesn't have the momentum to flow further down the hill to wipe out footprints. And it might only collapse the specific section of the tent it hits, leaving the edges and the structural ski poles perfectly intact.
So this heavy block drops on the tent right on top of the sleeping hikers.
The EPFL simulation mathematically proved that the weight and velocity of that specific block of dense snow hitting a human body lying on a rigid surface.
Like the skis they had laid on the floor of the tent for insulation.
Exactly. The impact would compress the chest cavity with exactly enough force to cause the severe rib and skull fractures seen in Dubinina, Zolotaryov, and Thibaut Brignol.
And without causing exterior lacerations because of the pillow effect we talked about.
You got it. It aligns perfectly.
You know, the physical modeling is incredibly sound. It explains the trauma perfectly. But human psychology is messy.
Very messy.
If the avalanche theory is so physically sound, why did it take a Disney movie's code to prove it? And why does half the world still refuse to accept it? People look at the barefoot escape and the missing tongues, and they immediately pivot to the paranormal or the military.
Well, the internet loves a good conspiracy.
Let's walk through those alternative theories, because I feel like they reveal so much about what we find truly terrifying.
Sure. The most prominent weather-based alternative theory focuses on those katabatic winds, but it introduces this bizarre physiological twist known as paradoxical undressing.
Because finding seasoned hikers out in the snow in only their underwear defies all logic.
It completely defies logic until you understand how the human brain fails under extreme hypothermia.
Okay, explain that to us.
As we discussed earlier, your body initially constricts blood vessels in the extremities to keep your core warm. But as hypothermia reaches its final severe stages, the muscles controlling those constricted blood vessels become completely exhausted.
And they fail.
They fail entirely.
And suddenly, all that trapped blood just rushes back to the skin's surface.
Exactly. The sudden rush of blood to the cold skin sends a massive, overwhelming signal to the hypothalamus in the brain.
Let me guess. It tricks the brain into feeling hot.
Yes. The freezing victim suddenly feels a sensation of intense, unbearable heat. They feel as though they are literally burning alive.
That is so incredibly cruel.
It really is. In a state of profound delirium, they tear off their clothes to escape the heat. It's a documented medical phenomenon that perfectly explains why they ignored the warm gear back at the tent and were found in states of undress.
Your own body essentially tricks you into accelerating your death in your final moments.
That's tragic.
But paradoxical undressing happens at the very end of the timeline, right? What caused the initial panic in the tent if it wasn't a snow slab? What about the infrasound hypothesis? I've seen that one all over YouTube.
Yes. The infrasound hypothesis explores the idea of acoustic trauma. Fluid dynamicists noted that the specific smooth, dome-like topography of Kholat-Syakhl, interacting with hurricane-force winds, could create an aerodynamic phenomenon called a Kármán vortex street.
A Kármán vortex street. What exactly is that?
Imagine water flowing rapidly around a perfectly round pillar in a river.
Okay.
The water doesn't just flow smoothly past, right? It creates alternating swirling eddies or vortices on the backside of the pillar. The same thing happens with air flowing over a dome-shaped mountain.
Oh, I see.
These alternating vortices generate low-frequency sound waves, specifically in the infrasound range of 10 to 20 hertz.
And human ears can't pick up those frequencies, right?
We cannot hear infrasound, no.
Oh.
But our bodies can perceive it. NASA and other scientific bodies have conducted extensive studies on infrasound exposure.
What does it do to a person?
Because the frequency resonates with the fluid in the human inner ear and the internal organs of the chest cavity, it can cause profound physiological distress.
Like what?
Exposure triggers intense nausea, disorientation, blurred vision, and most notably, a sense of overwhelming, irrational dread. It induces sheer mass panic.
Wow. So picture this. You have 9 people trapped in a dark tent. The wind is howling outside. Suddenly, they are engulfed by an invisible, inaudible wave of acoustic energy that makes their brains scream that they're about to die.
Right.
They slash the tent and run because their neurochemistry is basically forcing a flight response.
It is a very compelling theory for the psychological panic, but it completely fails to explain the massive physical trauma found on the bodies in the ravine.
Because sound waves do not crush human ribs.
Exactly. This massive gap in the environmental theories is why investigators inevitably turn their attention toward human intervention.
And in 1959, human intervention usually meant the Cold War military apparatus.
Oh, inevitably.
Let's talk about the glowing orange fireballs. This isn't just some spooky internet rumor, is it? There were genuine documented reports from local residents, meteorologists, and even other hiking groups up to 50 kilometers away.
Yes, very well documented.
They all reported seeing bright, glowing orange spheres moving across the night sky on the exact date of the incident.
Well, the Soviet Union in the late 1950s was aggressively testing new weapon systems in complete secrecy.
Right.
The Kapustin Yar test range, while located far to the south, frequently launched R-7 ballistic missiles whose trajectories carried them right over the northern Urals. The military theory proposes that the hikers were the victims of an errant missile test.
But how does a missile test in the upper atmosphere crush people on the ground? I mean, without leaving a crater.
Proponents of this theory argue that a malfunctioning missile might have detonated in the lower atmosphere or lost trajectory. These early rockets utilized highly volatile hypergolic fuels, specifically unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and fuming nitric acid.
Those sound incredibly toxic.
They are. These chemicals ignite spontaneously upon contact with each other. If a missile malfunctioned and the fuel failed to burn, it could aerosolize into a heavy, highly toxic fog that would just sink to the ground.
So if a cloud of unspent nitric acid fog descended on the tent in the middle of the night, it would cause severe chemical burns to their lungs and eyes.
Right.
They would be suffocating, coughing violently, and fleeing the invisible gas cloud in sheer panic.
And it would also explain the odd orange or yellowish tint to the victim's skin that some witnesses at the closed casket funerals later reported.
But again, a toxic gas cloud does not explain blunt force car crash trauma.
It doesn't. Some military theorists suggest the trauma was caused by concussion waves from an aerial detonation, or, even darker, by a military cleanup crew that arrived on the scene later and violently silenced the injured hikers to protect state secrets.
And the ultimate fuel for the military cover-up theory is the radiation, right? The traces of beta radiation found on Dubinina and Kolovatov's clothing. How do we explain nuclear material in the middle of a snowy wilderness?
Well, if we look closely at the historical context of the hikers' lives, the radiation becomes far less mysterious. Yuri Krivonashenko actually worked as an engineer at the Mayak nuclear facility.
Wait, the Mayak facility? Was that the site of the Kishtim disaster in 1957?
Yes, exactly.
That was a massive radioactive explosion that the Soviet government kept totally hidden from the world for decades.
It was one of the worst nuclear accidents in history prior to Chernobyl.
Huh.
So Krivonashenko lived and worked in a highly contaminated environment.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It's entirely plausible that he brought contaminated clothing on the trip, and that clothing was later worn by others or just cross-contaminated in the tent.
That makes perfect sense.
But there is actually an even simpler, far more common explanation regarding the camping gear of the era.
What kind of camping gear emits radiation?
Portable camping lanterns.
Lanterns.
Yeah. In the 1950s, the fragile fabric mantles used inside gas camping lanterns were heavily coated in a radioactive element called thorium.
Why would they use thorium?
Thorium dioxide was used because when heated by the gas flame, it glows with an incredibly bright white light. However, thorium naturally decays over time and emits alpha and beta particles.
So if a lantern mantle broke inside a backpack or during the chaos of the night, the thorium dust would just spill out.
Exactly. If that dust got onto Dubinina's sweater or Kolvatov's trousers, it would trigger the Geiger counters in the laboratory exactly as the official reports recorded.
Wow.
The radiation is a classic red herring. It's a terrifying buzzword that obscures a completely mundane origin.
It is amazing how radioactive clothing sounds like a smoking gun for a nuclear conspiracy, but it just turns out to be a broken light bulb.
Pretty much.
But we have to address the most sensational theories because the internet loves the dramatic. We have mysterious lights in the sky, we have fleeing victims, and we have unexplained trauma. Naturally, people leap to the paranormal.
Oh, absolutely. The paranormal theories, particularly the UFO claims, were heavily fueled by the intense secrecy of the Soviet state.
Because when people don't get answers, they make them up.
It's exactly. When a government refuses to provide a clear explanation for a traumatic event, the public imagination immediately fills the void with the most spectacular possibilities available. And we also really must mention the initial highly damaging suspicions placed on the indigenous Mansi people.
Right. The Mansi are the local reindeer herders of the region. I know the Soviet authorities aggressively interrogated several Mansi hunters, suspecting they might have attacked the hikers for, trespassing on sacred religious land.
Yeah, but the Mansi were completely cleared of any involvement, and for very good reason.
Because there was no evidence.
Right. First, anthropologists confirmed that the mountain Kolachiakal was not considered particularly sacred or forbidden by the Mansi culture. But more importantly, the physical evidence on the mountain totally exonerated them.
Because of the footprints. Well,
Exactly. There were absolutely no other footprints on the slope. There were no signs of a struggle in the snow, no tracks of an approaching raiding party, and no missing supplies.
yeah, a raiding party would not leave behind valuable winter coats, money, and food. But if we strip away the Mansi, the military, and the aliens, we still have to explain the detail that makes everyone's stomach turn. The missing eyes and tongue in the ravine.
Right, the most gruesome part.
When people hear missing tongue, they don't picture snow physics. They picture a yeti, an animal attack, or a surgical removal by an assassin. Why does science suggest a much wetter explanation for this?
This is where a critical misunderstanding of forensic taphonomy, which is the study of what happens to a body after death, misleads the public.
Okay, walk us through it.
We have to remember the exact location and conditions where those 4 specific bodies were found. They were not lying on the open snow like the first 5 victims. They were found deep in a ravine.
Under 4 meters of snow?
Yes, but more critically, they were resting in a running meltwater stream at the bottom of that ravine.
Oh, a running stream.
They lay submerged in moving water for 3 full months before they were discovered in the spring.
How does running water affect a body differently than just freezing snow?
Well, soft tissue autolysis, the natural cellular breakdown of the body, accelerates rapidly in a wet environment. Furthermore, running water acts as an abrasive force. And we cannot ignore the reality of natural scavenging.
Scavenging from animals.
Small aquatic creatures, insects, or small rodents in the stream will naturally seek out nutrients.
And they go for the softest, most exposed tissues first.
Exactly. The eyes, the tongue, the soft tissue of the lips and cheeks are the first to degrade or be scavenged.
That makes total sense.
It is standard expected postmortem decay for a body submerged in a thawing riverbed for months. The missing tongue is not evidence of a conspiracy, an interrogation, or a monster. It is simply the grim reality of biology interacting with a harsh environment over time.
It's so sobering when you put it like that. If we synthesize all of these distinct pieces of evidence, the EPFL physics models, the fluid dynamics of the wind, the biology of hypothermia, and the forensic reality of the ravine, what does the overarching timeline of that night actually look like?
The modern synthesis presents a deeply tragic chain of events. It is basically a perfect storm of environmental hazards.
Start from when they pitched the tent.
So the hikers cut their tent platform into the slope, which weakens the underlying depth hoar layer of the snowpack. Hours later, in the dark, severe katabatic winds begin loading massive amounts of dense snow directly onto the slope above them.
The temperature is dropping. The wind is roaring deafeningly loud.
Suddenly, the compromised snowpack shears. A dense, incredibly heavy slab of hard snow slides down just a few feet and impacts the tent.
And that's when the trauma happens.
Right. The sheer weight crushes the chest cavities of Dubinin and Zolotaryov and fractures Thibaut Brignol's skull as they lie on their rigid skis. The tent partially collapses. It's pitch black. The uninjured hikers are jolted awake.
They must have been terrified.
They hear the roaring wind, which they likely mistake for a massive continuous avalanche. They believe the entire mountain is coming down on them.
They realize they have critically injured friends. The main exit is buried or too slow to open, so they take a knife, slash the canvas, and drag their injured friends out into the storm.
And they flee downslope toward the distant trees, believing they must get out of the path of the avalanche. They walk carefully to support the injured, but once they leave that tent barefoot in minus 25-degree weather, survival becomes mathematically impossible.
They make it to the cedar tree. They manage to start a small fire using wet branches, which requires immense effort.
But the fire is simply not enough. The uninjured members realize they are freezing to death. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin make the desperate choice to crawl back up the mountain toward the tent to retrieve coats and boots.
And they succumb to hypothermia on the slope.
Yes. The remaining uninjured member, Kolvatov, stays with the severely injured hikers, moving them into the ravine to seek shelter from the wind. But the trauma of the crushed chests and the extreme cold eventually claim them all.
I want to address you, the listener, directly for a moment to clarify what is definitively false based on modern science. There was no military hit squad silencing witnesses.
No.
There was no Yeti or unknown cryptids stalking them. The indigenous Mansi people had absolutely nothing to do with the tragedy. The bizarre mutilations were just the natural, expected decay of bodies left in a thawing riverbed for months.
And the radiation was a mid-century red herring, likely from a broken lantern.
Exactly. And yet, even with the exhaustive Disney Frozen physics models and biological explanations, a massive portion of the public still pushes back.
Oh, heavily. People refuse to accept the slab avalanche theory because it requires accepting a cascade of unlikely events and recognizing that highly experienced people made fatal errors in judgment.
Which brings up a fascinating point about how we process mysteries. Think about the cultural lens of the 1960s. That was peak Cold War paranoia.
Right.
The government was hiding nuclear disasters and missile tests, so of course the public assumed this had to be a secret weapon. But contrast that with the internet sleuth culture we have today.
It's very different. Today, we treat historical tragedies like true crime puzzles designed for our entertainment.
We really do.
We assume that every stray detail, a broken lantern mantle, a misidentified piece of clothing, an oddly shaped footprint, must be a crucial clue in a grand cinematic conspiracy. We demand that mysteries have a neat narrative resolution with a clear villain.
Because it is genuinely terrifying to look at the raw facts. It is terrifying to accept that 9 highly trained, fit, intelligent young people can be utterly wiped out by bad weather and a patch of unstable snow.
That is the psychological crux of the Dyatlov Pass mythology. We invent military plots, KGB assassins, and radioactive phenomena, because a universe with villains is fundamentally less frightening than a universe ruled by random, chaotic, indifferent nature.
Because you can fight a villain.
Exactly. The human villain can be understood. The military plot can be uncovered. But you cannot reason with a katabatic wind or negotiate with a collapsing slab of ice. Nature simply acts without malice or intent, and that absolute indifference is the hardest thing for the human mind to accept.
It's always easier to blame a monster than a snowdrift. But this tragedy did actually change something tangible in the real world, didn't it? It had massive implications for modern mountaineering.
It absolutely did. The Dyatlov Pass incident forced a complete global reevaluation of snow mechanics and avalanche risks.
How so?
Prior to this, slopes under 30 degrees were generally considered perfectly safe from avalanches. This case proved that even on low-angle slopes, human activity like digging a small tent platform combined with wind-loaded snow can create deadly, localized micro-avalanches.
Wow.
Safety protocols and risk assessments for winter camping were completely rewritten because of what happened on Koletsiakol.
So if the science is so sound now, if the EPFL models mathematically prove the snow mechanics and the medical literature perfectly explains the paradoxical undressing, why do you think the Dyatlov Pass remains the ultimate locked room mystery of the wilderness? Are we just addicted to the myth?
I think we're drawn to the profound human element of those final hours. Physics can perfectly explain the sheer strength of the snow slab, and biology can map the exact vascular failure of hypothermia.
Right.
But science cannot fully capture the sheer psychological terror of what those 9 people experienced in the dark. The frantic, heroic effort to drag their injured friends down a freezing mountain, the realization that the fire is dying, the agonizing slow crawl back up the slope in the snow.
Yeah.
That emotional resonance ensures the story will never just be reduced to a physics equation.
It's true. When you look back at how this case has evolved over the decades, it's profound. In 1959, the official Soviet line was an unknown compelling force.
Which sounded almost mythical, like a curse.
Right. But today, we have fluid dynamics simulations proving the mechanics of snow slabs on a microscopic level. It shows that some mysteries don't get solved with a dramatic confession in a courtroom or a smoking gun found in a vault.
They get solved quietly, decades later, by scientists staring at computer models in a laboratory, applying new technology to old data.
Yet, the eerie human element, the terror of those final hours in the freezing dark, will never be completely unraveled.
It leaves us with a lingering, unsettling image of our own fragility in the face of the natural world.
I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. Consider the psychological horror of that night. You are a trained mountaineer. You do everything right. You check the weather. You build a shelter to survive the freezing wilderness. You look out for your friends. What goes through your mind when the very shelter you built to keep you alive suddenly becomes the thing that crushes you in the dark?
It's a terrifying thought.
The true terror of the Dyatlov Pass wasn't a monster. It was the mountain itself waking up.
A profound reminder of our vulnerability.
Next time we return to a remote German farmhouse where 6 murders shocked Europe. This time we focus on one haunting question. Was the killer not a stranger, but someone the family knew and trusted?